A sudden knock echoed through the storm. Jonah shot to his feet, hand gripping the rifle beside his chair. The wind howled louder as he slid the latch. The door flew open, and a figure collapsed right on the threshold. It was an Apache woman, tall, muscular, wrapped in a tattered deer hide soaked through by the rain, freezing cold against her skin. Her bare feet were torn and bleeding, rainwater mixed with blood trickling across the wooden floor. She struggled to lift her head, her deep, dark eyes locked onto Jonah's, her breathing shallow and ragged. Her voice was so faint it was barely more than a whisper. "Please, let me stay the night. I will die if I stay out there." Jonah held the rifle raised for a long, frozen moment. His mind screamed not to let any Apache inside, but his heart, though tired, though torn, still carried a little warmth. He knelt down, placing a hand on her shoulder, her skin ice cold, her muscles hard as steel. "All right, come in." He pulled her inside and shut the door before the wind could rip the roof clean off the cabin. She collapsed onto the floor, and Jonah hurried to relight the fire, covering her with the thickest blanket he had. Outside, the storm kept roaring. Dawn came slowly, pale light slipping through the gaps between the cabin's wooden planks. By the fireplace, Taya lay curled beneath a thick blanket, her breathing heavy but steadier than the night before. Her long black hair, tangled and unkempt, fell over a sun-darkened face, revealing bruises along her neck and shoulders, traces of violence and escape. Jonah knelt beside her, checking the bandages wrapped around her feet. He had cleaned the blood, applied ointment, and dressed the wounds using strips torn from his own shirt. Still, every slight movement made her wince with pain. She woke just as Jonah was replacing the damp cloth on her forehead. Survival instinct kicked in. She bolted upright, hand reaching for an invisible knife. "Where am I?" she gasped, panic in her eyes. Jonah raised both hands in a calm, open gesture. "You are in my home. Last night, you nearly collapsed dead at my door." Taya glanced around, realizing she was being cared for. Her face relaxed a little, but her eyes stayed wary, like a wild animal cornered. Jonah handed her a bowl of warm water. She took it, her hands trembling slightly, sipping carefully as if afraid she might spill what little life she had left. A long moment passed before she spoke, her voice soft. "My name is Taya." Jonah nodded. "Jonah Keen." She stayed quiet, eyes drifting from her wounds back to him. "You saved me." "Why?" Jonah exhaled, eyes clouded with shadows of the past. "I do not let anyone die on my doorstep. Not again." Taya understood this man carried a pain words could not explain. They sat in silence for a while. The fire crackled softly. The wind outside sighed in long, steady waves. Then Taya clutched the blanket tighter, her voice nearly swept away by the wind. I stabbed a man. He tried to do something terrible to me. They want to punish me. They say I bring bad luck. That since the day I was born I have only brought disaster." Jonah's hand clenched, his voice low and steady. "If you survived and made it all the way here, that is not bad luck. That is will." She looked at him. The firelight flickered in her dark eyes like embers caught in the storm. "I have nowhere else to go, Jonah," she whispered. "Then stay," he said without hesitation. "For as long as you want." She froze. Her lips trembled, as if she wanted to speak, but the words would not come. Outside, snow had begun to fall gently across the pine forest. Inside the cabin, a small seed of trust had taken root, quiet but strong, the kind no storm could easily tear away. The days passed slowly and quietly in the cold of the western frontier. Jonah repaired the fence that had broken during the winter, while Taya sat not far away, dressing her wounds in the early sunlight. Every morning, he left a bowl of hot porridge by her bedside before heading out to work. By noon, she would practice walking, bracing herself against the cabin wall, trying to teach her bloodied legs how to endure all over again. After just 3 days, Taya had made up her mind she was not going to lie still anymore. When Jonah was out back splitting wood, she walked up to him, her strong shoulders taut beneath the torn deer hide. "Let me help." Jonah shook his head. "Your legs are still hurt. Just rest." She answered with a look sharp as a blade. "Hurt means I am still alive." Without another word, she picked up a log nearly as thick as Jonah's thigh, something most women would struggle to lift. Jonah paused. On the weathered face of the old soldier, for the first time, there was a flicker of surprise and respect. From that day on, they worked side by side. He chopped the wood, she stacked it in the shed. He fixed the roof, she held the ladder and passed the nails. He taught her how to cook a simple stew. She taught him how to preserve meat with salt and smoke, the Apache way. One night, as the snow began to fall again, they sat across from each other at the small table. The fireplace crackled, casting a warm light across both of their faces. Jonah asked, his voice gravelly, "If things stay quiet, where will you go?" Taya lowered her gaze to the half-finished bowl of soup. "Do you want me to leave?" Jonah said nothing. The silence stretched, broken only by the wind howling outside. She set the bowl down and straightened up. "Your cabin, it used to hold only one person. Now it holds me two. If you want, I could help make it less cold." Jonah looked up. In those eyes that had watched comrades die in war, that had seen the woman he loved walk away, there was now a strange light. Like hope, learning to breathe again. He answered softly, "It already feels warmer." In that moment, the world seemed to stop breathing. There was no grand smile, no declaration. Only two eyes meeting and holding long enough to know that loneliness had finally lost its grip. As Taya stood to tend the fire, Jonah noticed she no longer limped as badly. Her calves were stronger. Her stance held a quiet pride she had not carried when she first arrived. He realized this cabin was changing. No, he was changing, and it all began that stormy night, when she collapsed at his door like a miracle no one ever saw coming. A week had passed. The ice on the cabin roof slowly melted into glistening drops, tapping gently onto the wooden steps below. Inside, the air had changed too, no longer heavy and somber, but warmer, more alive, filled with the footsteps of two people slowly healing one another. That night, as the wind swept through the pine trees, Jonah and Taya sat by the fireplace, each holding a cup of hot tea. The fire cast flickering shadows on the walls, like two souls still learning not to fear the light. It was Taya who spoke first, her voice soft but certain. "Have you ever loved someone?" Jonah froze. The question touched a scar that had never truly healed. He tightened his grip on the cup. "Yes. Someone I swore I would protect." "Where is she now?" Taya asked gently. Jonah stared into the fire. The heat stung his eyes, or maybe it was the memories he had tried so hard to bury. "She has been gone a long time. That winter, it was too long for me to bear. She fell gravely ill. I sold everything I owned, trying to save her. But all I bought was time. And then, she left me not long after." His voice broke at the end. Taya said nothing at first. She reached out and placed her hand on his strong, calloused, and now trembling ever so slightly. "You did everything you could," she said, her voice like a balm to his wounds. "Her death was not your fault." Jonah turned to look at her. In Taya's deep, dark eyes that had seen cruelties even he could not imagine, he saw something raw and undeniable. "The most peaceful souls are often the ones who have walked through hell." He asked, "What about you? Who left you out in the storm like that?" Taya gave a soft laugh, a sound without joy. "I ran. They said I was cursed. That from the moment I was born, I brought death." She lifted her head, her voice growing lower. "But I knew, if I stayed, that knife would have killed me before I ever got to him." In the firelight, Jonah saw it clearly now. She was not just a survivor, she was a warrior. And he thought to himself, if angels ever fall from the sky, they would look like this. Taya leaned back, arms wrapped around herself. "If you want me to leave once I am healed, I will." Jonah did not let her finish. "Taya, I do not want you to go anywhere." She froze, her eyes suddenly shining. Jonah continued. Slowly, "I used to think life was just a cold, empty wall. But since you walked in, I can hear my heart beating again." Taya lowered her head, a small smile ghosting across her lips. "This cabin is not cold anymore. It has not been for a while." Outside, the wind had softened. Inside, another fire had been lit, one no storm could ever put out. "I am grateful you are here. If this story brings back memories for you, memories of dusty evenings and the echo of hoofbeats in your heart, subscribe to my channel. So each day, we can sit together again, and I will tell you another story from the West. That morning, before the sun had even risen, the crows were already screeching wildly in the pine trees behind the cabin. Jonah knew that was never a good sign. He was stacking wood on the porch when the sound of galloping hooves thundered in the distance. Taya stepped out the door, her face slightly pale. She recognized that sound, the sound of those who had once hunted her. Jonah placed a hand on the grip of his rifle. "Get inside." "I am not hiding," Taya replied, her voice like steel. 4 figures on horseback emerged from the mist. All 4 were Apache, dressed in worn animal hides, their faces painted with fierce strokes of red and black. When they saw Taya, they yanked their reins and stopped immediately. The tallest one growled, "Taya, you are coming back. The chief wants you judged before the council. No one leaves the tribe without blood to pay." Taya stepped forward, her gaze unflinching. "I have already bled. The blood of the man who tried to force himself on me." The man spat on the ground. "Exactly. You bring bad omens. Ever since you were born, death has followed our people." Jonah stepped in, placing himself squarely between them. "I do not care what you believe, but she is standing on my land. And on this land, no one lays a hand on her." 2 of them turned their eyes to Jonah, hatred flashing like a knife. "She is just a savage. Do you really think she is worth anything?" Jonah clenched his jaw, his voice like falling stone. "She is my guest, and anyone who wants to touch my guest will have to go through me first." One of them drew a knife, the steel flashing in the morning light. Without hesitation, Taya picked up a piece of firewood and stood shoulder to shoulder with Jonah, her muscles tensed, ready to fight like a true warrior. Before they could move, Jonah drew his rifle in a blur. Bang! The bullet struck the ground just inches from their horse's hoof, dirt and gravel flying. Jonah's voice was calm and cold. "That was my only warning shot." The 4 men stared him down, but Jonah's gaze was unwavering, the eyes of a man who had walked through war, lost everything, and feared nothing. The leader gritted his teeth. "Fine. But she will not escape forever. One day, our people will come and reclaim what belongs to the tribe." They turned their horses and rode off into a cloud of dust, leaving behind a silence as heavy as stone on the cabin's porch. Jonah lowered his rifle. His breath was steady, but not from fear. It was from a decision made. Taya looked at him, her dark eyes full of emotion. "You did not have to do that for me." "It was not for you," Jonah said, locking eyes with her. "It was for what is right." Taya trembled not from the cold, but because for the first time in her life, someone had stood up and protected her. In the crisp wind, the small cabin was no longer just a place to hide. It had become a stronghold for 2 hearts learning how to love and how to protect one another. That night, the cold was so biting the ground froze solid within just a few breaths. Snow fell thick, and the wind howled like it was trying to tear the roof off the tiny cabin buried deep in the woods. Jonah locked every door tight and fed more logs into the fire. But the cold still crept in through every crack between the wooden planks. Taya curled up under the blanket, but her lips were trembling, and the soft chattering of her teeth was unmistakable. Jonah noticed and stood up. He brought over another blanket and draped it over her shoulders. "Staying warm is easier if you stay awake." She nodded faintly. Though her hands were still purple from the cold, Jonah hesitated for a second, then said, "Closer to the fire." She scooted in, but still kept a little distance between them. Jonah sat down beside her, trying to remain calm, but that small gap felt like a fragile line his heart kept reaching toward. The wind howled louder. A loose board on the roof slammed hard, shaking the whole cabin. Taya flinched instinctively and fell into Jonah. He caught her, his warm hands resting on her strong arms. Taya looked up. Their faces were just a few breaths apart. "Are you scared?" Jonah asked softly. "No," she replied, her breath warm against his cheek. "It is just the first time I have had a place to stay." Those words stopped Jonah cold. He had never heard anything so painful and so beautiful all at once. Taya placed her hand on his chest, right over his heart, strong, but missing something. "Your heart is cold, but it is still beating." He said nothing. He only wrapped an arm around her back, pulling her closer, letting their warmth blend into one. That moment lingered, then melted. The kiss came slow as if afraid to break something sacred, but when their lips touched, every wall built from loneliness over the years came crashing down. Jonah cupped her face, feeling her breath warm his lungs. Taya wrapped her arms around his neck, holding him like she was afraid he might disappear. Beneath the blankets, their bodies found each other, sharing heat, not just because the night was cold, but because they had finally found where they belonged. After the kiss, Taya rested her forehead against his shoulder. "If you want me to stay, I will. Not because I have nowhere else to go, but because I want to be here." Jonah held her tighter, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Stay, with me." In the fireplace, the flames roared higher. Outside, the snowstorm raged on, but inside the cabin, their hearts had just found safety for the first time in a lifetime of storms. The next morning, before the sun had even crested the hills, Taya was already awake. She stepped out onto the porch, taking a deep breath of the crisp mountain air. Snow still lightly dusted the grass, but it no longer buried the path like it had the night before. Inside the cabin, Jonah was still asleep for the first time in years. He had slept deeply. Taya looked toward the trail that led out of the woods. If she followed it straight for half a day, she might run into Apache scouts, or patrol soldiers, or some other danger waiting in silence. But this time, her feet no longer wanted to run. When Jonah stepped outside, rubbing his eyes under the early light, he saw her standing there strong and steady, like a statue carved from the spirit of a warrior. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "The future," Taya replied, eyes still fixed on the horizon. "Your future?" She turned to him, a faint smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Ours." Jonah froze for a moment. That one word "ours" was something his heart had forgotten how to hope for. Now, it was waking up again. Together, they began to build, crafting a new life with their own two hands. Taya cleaned out the dusty old shed and turned it into a storehouse for food and pelts. She planted small vegetable beds behind the cabin. Jonah repaired the horse stall, strengthened the fences. He even hung extra hides along the walls to block the wind and protect the cabin from the next snowstorm. That evening, as they rested after a long day's work, Jonah brought out a small wooden box. He opened it to reveal a simple silver ring, dulled slightly with age. "It belonged to my wife," he said, eyes lowered. "I kept it to remember, but holding on for too long turns memory into chains." Taya said nothing. She simply placed her hand gently over his. Jonah stood and walked toward the trees out back. Taya followed him. Beneath the tall pines, Jonah dug a small hole. He placed the ring inside, then covered it with earth. No goodbyes. Just a long, deep breath, as if letting go of a part of his soul. He turned to Taya. "From today on, I live for what is in front of me." Taya smiled softly. "And I will never let you be alone again." That night, by the firelight, Taya pressed her hand lightly to his chest. "I used to be taught that freedom meant going wherever you wanted. Now I understand. Freedom is staying where your heart belongs." Jonah touched her cheek with his rough, calloused hand, his gaze warm as the flame beside them. "Then choose me, every day." Taya answered not with words, but with a kiss. Deep. Certain. Outside the door, the forest wind blew gently. Inside that small cabin, they no longer feared the future, because now, neither of them would walk it alone. Spring returned to the valley with the first patches of green grass. The ice melted from the streams, and birds came back, their songs filling the air each morning. Jonah Keene's small cabin, once a lonely fortress against the dark, now held a different kind of warmth, the warmth of a home where someone waited for someone else. Taya changed day by day. Her face had grown slightly rounder, softer. Her deep, dark eyes now knew how to smile more often. And the thing that made Jonah's heart race every time he saw it, her hand, always resting on her belly, where new life was beginning. One morning, Jonah was chopping meat when Taya stepped up beside him. "Jonah," she said softly, "I think we are going to have a child." The knife slipped from his hand and clattered onto the table. Jonah turned sharply, his lips parting, but no words came. Surprise, fear, and then a surge of joy he thought he would never feel again. He stepped forward, placed his hand on her belly, and looked into Taya's eyes. "A child, our child." Taya smiled, her eyes sparkling like melted spring water. Are you ready? Jonah took her hand tightly. I have been waiting for this, even if I did not know it. In the days that followed, Jonah worked without rest. He chopped wood and built a new room. He expanded the fence. He stocked up meat and firewood for the coming winter. He wanted that child to be born into a world of safety and love. One afternoon, Jonah took Taya out to the big pine tree behind the house. He pulled out a knife and carved into the bark strong letters full of love. Taya Kine. She touched her fingers to her name, trembling just slightly. Jonah. Are you sure? Marrying me means standing against both our worlds. Jonah placed both hands on her shoulders, looking deep into eyes that had seen too many nights without light. Taya, you are my world. She rested her head on his chest, tears soaking into his rough shirt. Not tears of pain, but the tears of someone who, for the first time, had been chosen. That night, 3 candles were lit in the cabin. Jonah and Taya stood facing each other, hand in hand. No preacher, no fancy vows, just 2 hearts promising to carry each other through life. And when they shared the kiss of husband and wife, the wind outside stilled, as if the forest itself was bearing witness. In the corner of the room, Taya's old deer-hide clothing was folded neatly, symbols of a past now left behind. And ahead, the sound of children's laughter waited to echo through the wild. In the place where loneliness once reigned, there was now the breath of 2 souls, the heartbeat of 3 destinies joined as one, a home built from love and choice. Jonah Keene was no longer the sorrowful, solitary man. He had become a man who truly lived and loved. And Taya, once branded as a curse, she had become a mother who would bring miracles into her own future. My friend, some wounds time cannot heal. Some pain no words can ease. But love, even when it comes late, even when it arrives in our darkest hour, can still pull us back from the edge of loneliness. Jonah and Taya once believed that all they had left was shadow. But they found each other, and in each other's trembling arms, 2 souls that had nearly died learned to beat again. Because love is not magic. Love is how we become magic for each other. It has been an honor to walk with you through this story. I truly hope you stay healthy and happy, no matter what comes your way. Be strong, my friends. You deserve respect, and you deserve love. I love all of you, my wonderful audience of Wild West storytelling. Tell me how this story made you feel. Leave a comment below. Type 1 if you loved this story. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more epic tales from the Wild West.